The Callisto Protocol is an action beat-em-up horror-style game that has been my most anticipated game ever since the first trailer for the game was shown at the 2020 Game Awards. After the rise and fall of the great Dead Space series, and with the creator of Dead Space, Glenn Schofield, holding the reins of the Callisto Protocol, it was hard to contain my excitement for what might scratch that ever-growing Dead Space itch. I pre-ordered the collector's edition as soon as it went live, and all I had to do was wait until the game came out to experience this next installment in the horror genre. What I and many others have experienced with the Callisto Protocol was not at all what was expected.
Personal log.
The Callisto Protocol starts off with two workers of the United Jupiter Company, Jacob Lee, played by Josh Duhamel, and his co-pilot Max, continuing their freight shipments of unknown cargo between Europa and Black Iron Prison. Things go awry when they find out a terrorist group broke aboard their ship. The ship eventually crashes back down to Callisto, and Jacob, along with the terrorist group's leader, played by Karen Fukuhara, being the only survivors, get rescued by the head of security of Black Iron Prison, Captain Leon Ferris, who is played by Sam Witwer. They are quickly thrown into prison from an order given to the captain. Jacob wakes up in his cell and sees that Black Iron Prison has quickly fallen into chaos from some sort of disease affecting the other prisoners, turning everyone into mindless monsters. After being thrown into this crazy situation, Jacob now has to find a way to escape. The story starts out pretty interesting, but fails to gain traction. It's not bad in any way, but it's very paint by numbers. The actors do a good job at portraying their characters and keeping the ball rolling, but that ball that's rolling stays on a flat surface the entire time. The actual characters don't really have any sort of dynamic interactions, characteristics, or tangible emotions until a bit later into the story. There is a hint of something that could make Jacob more of just a one-sided coin, but it gets debunked within the story, so it never becomes anything other than what it could have been. The characters are pretty weak, and very one-note, and on-the-nose characterizations. I feel like there wasn't much time to flesh them out. I found it interesting that Jacob just knew how to do everything in the situations that were thrown at him. I think him being distraught about being in the situation could have been brought up more and gave him some needed characterization. Since you are dodging and weaving all the time during combat, maybe it could have been mentioned that he used to be a boxer or something to give a little bit more structure of the eagerness and willingness to survive within Jacob. So to get this out of the way now, the game has a lot of problems. I feel like the game was built to be played like Dead Space, but somewhere down the line, it was approached differently to be much more constricted to give off a different horror feel, which is fine, but the way it was initially built still remains. I feel like this game is confused of what it wants to be. There are many different ways the game is constructed, but nothing ever molds correctly. The upgrade system, the environments, the actual gameplay, the lack of open-endedness, and the length of the game are all fighting with each other and inevitably collapses on itself just like the Black Iron Prison, which makes the game feel incredibly unfinished and unpolished. Gameplay plays slow both combat and exploration wise. Jacob walks slowly and there are a lot of crevices you have to fit through and vents you have to crawl into. There are some sections where you can only walk because the floor is covered with biophage goop. But there are some sections where you could absolutely run, but the game purposefully makes you walk for no reason. Maybe it's for loading reasons, who knows. The main weapon in Callisto Protocol is the stun baton that you use to swing and hit your enemies to knock them back and annihilate them. The enemies, the biophage, will run up to you swinging their arms wildly. You use the left analog stick to either dodge left, right, or hold down to block. It seems like the game explains it at first that you have to carefully time your dodges so you won't get hit, but the game tells you after the initial tutorial that you can just hold down in the direction instead of carefully timing it and it will work the same. Just don't hold the same direction twice in a row or to dodge because that can count as a hit for the enemy. You get a GRP or grip arm attachment which allows you to pick up objects and enemies and toss them. The grip meter regenerates slowly, but you can find grip canisters that will replenish the meter. There are also different weapons you obtain that fire differently, but basically give you the same results. Jacob can also stomp enemies in small blue lit boxes that may contain ammo or credits. These mechanics seem as if they will all flow together nicely. You get the ability after a couple hits with your stun baton to quickly aim up with your gun and shoot the enemy you're fighting, and then can go back to swinging at them, successfully juggling them and not letting them get a hit. You can also use your grip to throw exploding canisters or to pick up enemies and toss them at spikes hanging from the wall to eliminate them immediately. You can upgrade weapons to hold more ammo or to obtain an alternate fire mode to possibly gain advantage in troubling encounters. The combat works decent enough, but it is all pretty cumbersome with how it actually plays out. Mostly because of how slow Jacob is, the absence of a quick turn, and multiple enemies rushing you at once. If you are fighting any more than one enemy, especially if one gets behind you, you can dodge the enemy in front of you, but you can't see what any of the other enemies are doing. The field of view is small, and this will leave you getting hit constantly unless you are able to lure them in a single file line. The enemies also swing through your swing, and you can get damaged. It feels as if you are always working against the game. Enemies also skate toward you and get in your hitbox to get a hit or two, which is incredibly annoying when you are reloading or trying to assess the situation. Once you get in a combat situation, there is hardly ever a way to retreat, which you may think is purposeful with how the game is trying to make you be careful with what you do at all times, but it doesn't feel that way. This makes the game feel so shallow that you don't even care if you die or not, which isn't particularly a good sign for a horror game. Swapping weapons is incredibly bizarre. You press the right direction button to bring up your weapons, and you have to go up or down to pick the weapon you want and then select it with the X button. Then you have to wait until the changing of the weapon animation is done, because if you don't and aim too quickly, you will just re-equip the same weapon you were trying to swap out. This, mixed with dodging enemies assigned to the same way that you walk around, can be annoying during many combat situations. Oftentimes, I found myself running around in circles trying to equip a gun I had ammo for, but couldn't because enemies would constantly be skating towards me, and I had to dodge them at the same time. Sure, I could hit them with my stun baton, but other enemies could hit me while I'm dodging, and the only damage being done is toward me. The game gives you the powers and the environments for fast and flexible gunplay, but it can never be used when you need to focus on dodging and moving around all the enemies. There are spikes everywhere to throw enemies onto, but your grip ability is almost worthless unless you use what little credits you have to level it up to throw enemies further. Even then, the grip feels borked anyways because sometimes you will grip an enemy and it will just fall out of the grip for no reason, wasting your time allowing another enemy to hit you and wasting your precious grip meter. Like sometimes there are crates that you can bust open during boss fights, but the way the game is meant to be played slowly, it's not like you can just run up to those crates and stomp on them while fighting a boss at the same time. It's not even a smart idea to heal during combat with how slow the healing animation is. The guns you get in the game are also redundant. The first gun you get is a handgun, and then you get a small shotgun followed by another handgun, and then another shotgun. I mean, you're in a prison, so sure you're going to get some standard stuff, but they aren't distinguishable at all, especially during actual combat. It's not like you're going to shoot a whole lot anyway, so any unique attributes tied to a gun will be lost in the chaotic combat anyways, by you getting hit from undodgeable hit, or having to dodge and use your stun baton. Upgrading them to their alt fire ability is also basically another thing the game is actively letting you not do. There's no reason to look forward to upgrading them all the way anyway, since they don't have any special situational use other than causing a set amount of damage to an enemy. Upgrading your weapons is an entirely different story.
Please make a selection.
There are upgrade stations scattered around that print attachments that you equip to your handgun, which changes its function. Other than purchasing weapon upgrades, you can buy health and ammo and sell items for more credits. This is all pretty typical stuff for an action horror game, but the economy of Callisto Protocol is completely broken no thanks to the environment and how expensive everything is. Most things sell for anywhere between 100 to 1,000 Callisto credits, with some parts you can find selling for a bit more like 2,000. Upgrades are cheap at first, but all the weapons have branching upgrade paths that can get pretty expensive, like 4,200 credits for the best upgrade for just one path. But the game lays out everything in an unproductive manner that never lets you experience what you want in any meaningful way. You have very little inventory space at the beginning of the game with no way to upgrade it, only being able to hold 6 items besides your weapons. So oftentimes you have to manage what you want to carry and what to leave behind, which is fine for a horror game of course, but all the stations in the beginning are incredibly scarce. So you can hardly ever upgrade anything at all since you are getting so little credits and you can't carry enough things to sell at the stations. So if you really want to use the system the best that you can, you will have to be doing a lot of backtracking to pick up dropped items to sell, which slows the game down even more, especially with how linear the game is and with how many cracks you have to slip through or areas where you are forced to walk. At one point you come across a station, enter the next room, and you find some things that only function is for it to be sold, but the door you came through is locked and you can't go back. So you either have to carry it until you find another station, or leave it there to carry ammo, health, or grip instead. I understand the commitment the game is trying to put you in, but the way the game is handling is so obtuse and unrewarding for the player. Then later in the game, there are stations placed everywhere. It seems very unbalanced. You do get a suit halfway through the game, which gives you a bigger inventory and more health, which helps a lot management wise. There is no suit upgrade system though. You either don't have it at the beginning of the game or you have it halfway through. A suit upgrade system would be cool, but with how short the game is and the story being told, it's not feasible. That's just not how the game works, which in turn can't allow gameplay elements like that to work. I know on release day, the PC and Xbox versions encountered a lot of issues simply running the game. Luckily, I am playing on PS5 and only ever encountered anything jarring like frame rate drops late in the game with the door opening up weirdly. Other than that, from my experience, the game runs great. The 2D fire is off-putting with how great everything else looks, but that's really it. The sound design is superb. The metal creaking and clanking off in the distance, hearing a monster run up behind you with its sloppy, squelching footsteps, machine gears grinding and twisting within the halls of the cold prison, it's all amazing, top of the line even. Though everything looks and sounds great, there's a lot of nothing in the game. Often you will come into a room that looks cool with nothing in it. Bookcases, vending machines, pipes, offices, etc. are all littered throughout your trek through the prison. There are some collectibles to pick up in the form of audio logs and boxes you can open with some Callisto credits to upgrade your weapons, or a shot you can take to refill your health, but the way everything is presented with how linear the game is, it kind of feels like you are just sitting on a boat ride waiting for the cool stuff to happen. There are a lot of nooks and crannies where you will think a secret is, but it's kind of just a small path that leads nowhere. Everything is blocked off. The linearity definitely plays a way in how the game feels overall, since there's really nowhere else to go. The sense of abandonment and loss that I think the game is trying to convey are completely lost, so you quickly overcome the feeling of being scared, which stinks for a horror game. The few instances where the game opens up some branches in your pathway are reduced to scripted events. There's no real feeling that you are being chased or stalked. It is not always fun to be constantly pushed forward either. There are arrows everywhere telling you which direction to go, and a lot of areas that once you walk through, you get blocked off completely from going back. I'm not saying the game being linear is a bad thing, I actually like it a lot, but with how everything else plays out, it creates this atmosphere that is supposed to make you feel one way, but makes you feel the complete opposite. While the world looks amazing and the atmosphere is stellar, actually exploring is uninspired. All this mixed with how the game forces you into close quarter combat, this horror game becomes a lot less horror and more action. You end up wanting to get into fighting situations instead of fearing them. The areas of the game feel like it's trying to do all the cool room ideas from Dead Space. It feels dorky, like it's a carnival ride just showing all the best parts and doesn't feel consistent overall. Those cool moments are never earned. There is also no map, which I didn't have a problem with because the characters tell you where you need to go, and you can tell where you are by signs above doors or by the environment. There aren't many branching paths to go down, but the ones that are there just circle back around to the main path.
Can we just waltz our way in there?
I wish we could. It's not gonna be that easy, bro.
Any audio logs you pick up are boring and don't add anything significant to the story or the player's understanding of anything at all. You pick up an audio log from someone wearing a lab coat and it says their name is Dr. So-and-so, and their audio log would be something like, "Yes, I am a scientist and I'm working on this experiment," and wait, what the? Ah! At one point, the enemies will evolve by growing tentacles. You get a tutorial that says shoot off the tentacles in order to stop the spread of the virus so they don't get stronger. Then the wall behind that enemy says the same thing, shoot off the tentacles. Then you pick up the collectible that you need to pick up to continue the story, and that says the same thing. There is too much hand-holding for a super linear game. There are a lot of arrows in the game that always point you in the direction you need to go, but you need to go that way anyways. It's just so weird. So, on top of all these systems not working together and the PC and Xbox versions hardly working at all, there are a lot of different bugs and badly designed decisions I ran into. It is strange that all the buttons aren't used. The DualSense's pad isn't used for anything. If swapping guns could be changed, it would make the combat play a lot smoother. Sometimes enemies would simply disappear and I couldn't continue a section where you had to kill all the enemies, so I had to restart the checkpoint. The camera is wonky and gets thrown all over the place often. At one point during a fight, I was successfully dodging and then all of a sudden a death scene played out as if I got hit, even though I never did. The bosses only have 2 moves and the fights play like Ring Around the Rosie. While the enemies are cool looking and the biophage is unique enough to be different enough from all the other horror games, the tentacle gimmick is not inventive. When enemies do transform from their tentacles, they transform into the same one big enemy. I've had items disappearing through the floor. The falling animation is horrible. When characters and enemies bust through glass, the glass pane never appears broken. The quick swap ability is unlocked later into the game and is not an innate ability you have, or at least the tutorial for it doesn't pop up until later. The save system is just a checkpoint. When you save your game and then come back to it to continue, it starts you off at the last checkpoint, so you have to collect everything again. If you collect money, ammo, and other items after a combat encounter and die soon after or restart the checkpoint, it can put you after the combat encounter, but everything you picked up will be gone. This happened to me during a locked boss fight where I died during the fight, and when I came back I had none of the ammo that I picked up, so it made the boss harder than what it should have been. You can't switch between performance and fidelity modes in the middle of the game, and the extra outfits that you get from other means other than playing the game can only be changed from the main menu. I also played the game on the hardest difficulty, and the trophy glitched and I had to go back to my last checkpoint and finish the game again for it to register. The list only gets longer the more technical you want to get with it. The Callisto Protocol comes off as disappointing because it should have been so much better. Whether the creators or consumers agree or not, there was a lot riding on it. The game is trying to do too much in so little time. There needs to be more breathing room. While the systems the game gives you don't work well together, they still work well enough on their own for the game to be playable and enjoyable in some fashion. The difficulty of the game is hard for the wrong reasons. The challenge of the game and the challenge of the controls are different. It feels as if everything was carefully and deliberately created, but all the different systems were created separately without the others in mind. While some patches can fix most of the bugs, it won't fix the foundation of the game. Even then, I still had a lot of fun playing this game. It's done a good job in separating itself from the horror genre tag. It has created its own identity in a positive way. It's closer to a good game than a bad game in my opinion. I wasn't expecting this to be like Dead Space, and I wasn't expecting it to play like Dead Space either, so any conceived notion about the game wasn't tied down to what it could possibly be based on past experiences. I think having that mindset made me enjoy the game a lot more and allowed me to see past the flaws and see what the game was trying to do in the best possible way. While the Callisto Protocol has a lot of little issues and some essential problems that don't make a lot of sense, in the end, it is a unique and beautiful world that builds tensions at moments with fantastic sound design and world building through artistic environments. Even if its mediocre story and questionable gameplay features are not fun or rewarding, a continuation of the story would be welcomed. I give the Callisto Protocol a 6 out of 10.
Doctor, he's flatlining.